So the question I'm asking today is this 2013 Audi A6 BiTurbo diesel a possible replacement for my E63 AMG? So I guess there's some pretty obvious differences to point out to start with. We're comparing diesel in this Audi versus the petrol AMG. 400 horsepower in this, which I'll come to later, versus 700 in the AMG. You know, the fact that the Mercedes was probably an 87,000, 89,000 pound car new with the options. This is about 57,000 new with options. There's not such a big price difference nowadays actually on the second-hand market, but all these things, you know, I realise it's not a direct comparison, but really the question is 95% of the time in my Mercedes I'm cruising like this. I'm doing 60 miles an hour now on a motorway, on an A road, sorry, and for 5% of the time I'm ragging it around, having great fun in it, and that car makes me laugh and smile and grin like a lunatic every time I get in it. I absolutely love it. It's a superb car, best car I've ever owned. But the question is, does this do the same as the AMG for that 95% cruising around on the motorways, and does it offer enough performance to keep me happy in that remaining 5% where I might be able to drive it as I like? So similar era cars, this is 2013, my Mercedes is 2014. This is actually a very high mileage car. It's 155,000. I got it because it was relatively speaking cheap. It's also a category insurance write-off. First one I've ever bought. I'll show you maybe a bit more of that in a proper walk around video another time. But that meant that it was about 8,000 or so pounds, whereas my Mercedes is 23 or so thousand pounds probably worth. And that's really one of the reasons I'm looking to sell, try and liquidate some money, use it for other things, and still get almost all the enjoyment. So first things first, on the motorway, it's a lovely car this to drive. It's super comfortable, easy to drive, it's quiet, relaxing. You know, I'm cruising at 60 miles an hour here in top gear, 8th gear. We're doing 1200 RPM, so it's quiet. It's very good at cruising at higher speeds. Yeah, super comfortable really. So it does this job really well. This has got the optional tech pack on it, which was a bigger media screen, and then all the kind of driver aids like lane assist, radar cruise control, side impact warning systems, all the things that, to be honest, I never actually use. I very rarely turn any of that on any car. It's nice to have the bigger screen, I have to say. Other than that, not too fussed. Excellent seats. This is quite a weird set of options in this car. It's one of the few I've seen without full leather. It's got the Alcantara, so leather bolsters, but the central bits are kind of Alcantara type material. They're actually really nice. They've grown on me. They're very comfortable. They seem to have worn pretty well for a 150,000 mile car, as in not much wear. They're heated, lumbar supports, multiple adjustment, memory seats. So yeah, all good on that front. Actually, this has got another couple of weird options. This really old man wood inlay. Normally this is brushed aluminium, but again, it's a bit Marmite, but I quite like it. No panoramic sunroom, which is something I really would have liked. The sunroof on the E63 is really nice. This is, again, was one of the few I saw without one, to be honest, but yeah, I decided to get it anyway. What else? So this obviously has the ZF 8-speed auto gearbox, which is in everything nowadays. Works really nicely. Other than one, I think, fairly major fault. So I think this is some of the earliest software that Audi had on this. And very gentle acceleration in low gears, it's fine. On fairly hard acceleration, it's fine. It's the in-between, gears 1 to 3, it kind of slurs and slushes them and can't make up its mind which gear to be in, and it doesn't change well at all. I tried to get some software updates when I took it to get some modifications. Unfortunately, it didn't update the software, which I understand does solve the problem quite a bit. So I'm going to go back, I'll say a bit more about that later, but I'll try and get that done at a later date, try and persuade the guy I went to buy some new hardware for updating this, which he thinks might work. But actually the kickdown on this is better than in my E63 actually, and I use it more for that reason. On the motorway like this, it'll just drop down much more quickly and efficiently than in the Mercedes. The paddles on this are crappy little plastic things that don't feel at home, whereas they're nice. I think they're from billet aluminium in the E63, which is really nice. Another thing this car didn't have is the upgraded sound system, and normally I wouldn't worry too much about that, but I thought this would be fine. It is really crap. I'm really disappointed with how poor the sound quality is, but it's not the end of the world for me, but just a bit surprising and a bit disappointing really. So of course one of the age-old Audi complaints is lack of steering feel. So the steering is really light. There is pretty much zero feel through it. You get no feedback. It's where the Mercedes excels, to be honest, one of the areas. So yeah, this isn't, you lose a bit of enjoyment in that sense. Another major difference, obviously, this is four-wheel drive, it's a quattro system. I actually thought it was a Torsen central diff until I looked into it a bit more, and this is, and so that delivers under normal circumstances a 40-60, so 60 rear bias split of torque. The advantage over the Torsen is it can actually split, direct more torque to either the front or back. I think it's up to 70% to the front wheels and up to 85% to the rear wheels. So obviously that's got some performance benefits there. And the Quattro is really nice to have. You can hear that kick down there, just a gear, but it's very quick. Yeah, so obviously in the wet or on slippery roads, this has huge benefits. Quattro system works brilliantly, and I'd say it's as quick in those kind of conditions, maybe at lower speeds even slightly quicker than the AMG, just because of the crazy grip that Quattro gives. Obviously the AMG 700 horsepower, 1050 Newton meters through the rear wheels with a slip diff. You've got to be quite careful in lower speeds. It makes, that's what I enjoy. That's good fun, having to be gentle with the accelerator, feed it in. Audi Quattro, you can pretty much just floor it and get away with it. But it does have its advantages. I got this car, I didn't know when I went to see it that it had been modified. It had a stage 1 map, and it was running about 370, I think, maybe just under 370 horsepower. So a standard, this was 313 horsepower. I can't remember the torque now. Was it 550 Newton meters as standard? Modified, it was 820 Newton meters at about 2000 RPM. It went pretty quick, but the map I didn't think was the best, so really spiky in terms of torque delivery, and tailed off massively, even much over kind of 3,500 RPM, and with a really big flat spot at about 2,500 RPM, which I understand is where the turbos change over. So I wasn't particularly happy with that, and I've also read quite a lot on the forums about people who can get a lot more out of them. In particular, a guy called Bobby Singh, who's down Windsor way, and he's very well known for mapping Audi TDIs and BiTurbos. This is the 3-litre BiTurbo diesel, obviously. Took it to him. He did a bit of DPF work, new fuel sensor, had a bit of a clean up, and remapped it. He was going to do the gearbox update, as I said, but unfortunately that didn't work. So his map, he doesn't rolling road it, he does it all on the road, but equivalent cars, he's got around kind of 410 horsepower, 800 up to 850 Newton meters or so. This feels so much better. Not only more torque, it holds on to the torque, more power up the rev range. He's totally got rid of the flat spot at 2,500, which incidentally he told me is on the cars as standard, which I was amazed at, really. But there you go. So it drives really nicely now, and you know, it accelerates pretty well. I'll try and get a 0 to 60 times out of it, but people say it's low 4s or something, so it's reasonably quick. But where it really excels is that torque. You know, 800 and probably 850 or so, I guess. Certainly over 800 Newton meters is a fair amount, and it just pulls from even below 2,000. But once you're between 2,000 and 3,000 RPM. Huge waves of torque, and it is very easy to overtake stuff. So one of my key criteria for my cars, so if we flip down a few gears here, you'll see it pull. So that's a 4th gear pull, and it's pulling rapidly. But yeah, one of my main criteria really is to be able to overtake cars doing, say, 50 miles an hour on A roads and B roads safely, and you need a fair amount of power to do that, and this does that actually really, really well. So great car for this kind of driving. So the key question is, does it have as much fun for that kind of 5% when you get to drive it as you want? No, it doesn't, but it's probably, I'm thinking, enough to keep me amused. So I suppose the main downside, it's nowhere near as much power. It doesn't have that thump in the back excitement and the V8 noise. I've got some minor exhaust modifications to my E63, so it's a bit noisier, but it's that grin that puts on your face. This doesn't give you that feeling, but it's a fairly quick car compared with most other cars. I think you know, when you're used to almost supercar levels of performance, anything less is always going to seem like you're a bit shortchanged, but it's not too bad. I guess the real thing is the handling around any kind of twisty stuff is just not great. Not only lack of steering feel, the suspension it's a bit soft for me. So Audi do 3 different suspensions, so the standard kind of SE type suspension, then they do 2 S-line suspensions. I think one is dropped, they call it the 1BE suspension, is dropped 2 inches over the standard, and then they do an S-line Sport, the 1BV suspension, which is dropped another inch. So this is that intermediate one, dropped 2 inches, not the lowest. It's got too much body roll for me. It's slightly wallowy. The next thing I'm going to do to this is get some iBack Pro coils on it. Probably just keep with some decent kind of OEM type Sachs dampers. That should give me a slight drop, reduce the body roll, stiffen it up a bit, nothing too excessive, and I think it'll transform the handling. I prefer stiffer suspension anyway, nothing too stiff. But I think that'll make a difference. I've had that kit before, years ago, on a Mark II Focus ST, actually, transformed the handling. I think it'll do the same to this, and of course, that's where this really loses out. The chassis of the E63, the fact you've got the adjustable dampers, the handling is just another level. So, maybe I'll leave it there. Suffice to say, it doesn't compare in performance-wise. The E63 is just another level. In terms of value for money, for decent performance, potentially decent handling, and of course one of the key things, returning an average of 40 mpg so far, that can drop to 35 or so if I'm cruising a little bit faster on the motorways, or if I'm accelerating a bit harder. But you know, the overall average of the E63 is more like 24. So you're talking, you know, probably, what's that, 60% or so more fuel efficient. And that's, you know, the lesser performance is perhaps a decent trade-off and some money back in my bank. Bottom line is, I think I'm going to try and sell the E63 in a couple of months. Probably regret it forever. Enjoy myself, not quite as much, but still have some fun in this car. Reap the benefits of the MPG, and maybe in another few years I'll be looking at getting the newer model, the probably a States S213 4-litre twin turbo E63 as a replacement. So I'll say thanks for watching.